Hello, this is Danny Raymond, the voice behind Ray's Guide. I am at a bit of a strange point right now with Starfield content creation. I'm behind those who, thanks to favor from Bethesda, have had weeks to create comprehensive reviews, and yet still a few days ahead of folks who aren't paying for early access. I fired up the game as soon as it became live for me in early access and quickly crunched in about 17 hours of playtime, which was enough, avoiding distracting side quests, play the starting artifact quest, and given some time for reflection, real-life obligations, and creation time, here are the initial notes I have, focusing on things that are outside of the general scope of a review, since so many of those are out there already. And I want to make it clear, I am really enjoying the game overall and will be enjoying it a lot more in the future. Just because I'm not gushing like a fanboy does not mean I'm hating on the game. I just don't do gushing very well with this voice, and I feel that nothing improves unless people can actually honestly examine how it could be better. And that particularly goes for a game with huge modder communities. So, the welcome screen. Yes, this seems a bit basic, but was that really a lazy decision by Bethesda or an intentional piece of low-hanging fruit for would-be modders to make their first project? After all, a perfected game doesn't need mods. I found myself thinking that a lot when UI elements that were functional seemed unpolished. Was it lazy or an intentional opening for the modders? The game then throws you right into the world, which is good, and by all means use that time to get used to the UI. I wish that I had, because about an hour and a half into the game, I got frustrated and started all over. The reason is that using the mouse and keyboard, I was expecting certain UI conventions to be in play. Hovering for tips, right-clicking for context menus, the usual sort of stuff. So I dug out a spare Xbox controller from my ancient console and realized that this is how the game really was intended to be played and how most of the potential audience for my content would be playing it. Then comes the finding of the artifact, and if you've been following any Starfield content, you know that the main quest of Constellation is essentially a gem quest. Find the X number of gems that will somehow do something really important that defeat Foozle the evil wizard, or something like that. Now, as I said, I stuck straight to the Constellation questline because a good main questline will introduce you to a lot of the setting and other questlines. And it did. In fact, without even trying to see side quests, I reached the end of the starting questline with a long list of side quest opportunities and activities in my inventory, despite deliberately trying not to pick any up. I can only imagine how many I would have if I actually did seek out discussions with random persons. In fact, the list of missions and quest lines is so long that the basic categorized tree view soon gets difficult to use. Something more interesting and useful would be good, or again, is that Bethesda being basic or just leaving low-hanging fruit for the modders to pick up on? Now, I'm sure some of you are saying, don't spoil the ending of the central quest, and I won't. In fact, I can't. Because even though I said I played through the entire sequence, I didn't actually finish the quest. And thus, honestly, I can't actually say for sure that I did finish it. I got to the temple of the estimated time of arrival, and there was this big, impressive temple, big setting, impressive graphics, impressive music was swelling, and something clearly important was about to happen when the last words from my companion character was, "They appear to be reacting to our presence." And then, well, I floated into nothing. My character is left hanging in space, and I am even more hanging there not knowing what went wrong. So I tried recovering from the oldest save game that wasn't starting all over again, and same result. So I'm not going to spoil the ending because I'm sort of hoping one of you might spoil it for me. Or even better, give me a workaround to actually finish it myself, without having starting all over and hoping it'll work finally. So anyhow, 17 hours and only one soul-crushing game-breaking bug does in fact qualify as the least buggy Bethesda game launch ever. And well, I guess playing Star Citizen has maybe taught me to enjoy the journey rather than the ending. After all, in Star Citizen, 18 hours before a server crash would be considered damn good, would it not? And besides, there's this long list of individual quest lines in the major characters and the major faction groups for me to take off on, and this is of course where Bethesda games shine, and always have. I've said before that no game can include all of the landscape of gaming, or even all the landscape of science fiction. Each game has to map out their border, and much of what I have had to do in my first day of playing is to redefine what that border is, and well, it's a bit smaller than I'd hoped, and that is even given that I had intentionally been skeptical in my hopes. I had hoped that what had been described as Bethesda's first new IP in 25 years would do more to expand the boundaries of a Bethesda role-playing game. Instead, after the first day, it really does come across as Skyrim or Fallout, but in space. I'm kind of hoping that maybe the shipbuilding and base building will prove boundary stretching, but that hasn't been necessary in the first day of playing through the main questline. So Bethesda's niche has been between the open-world sandbox and the single epic story quest. Their games are more like an anthology of loosely connected short stories in a shared universe with a shared main character, you, rather than some grand space epic at an inflection point in the universe. Maybe my impression is slanted because I didn't actually see the ending of the starting quest line, but I'm confident that none of the other quest lines affect or are affected by it, so it can't be that world-shattering now, can it? And it doesn't seem like Bethesda is much interested in looking at the really big meta-story, or at least the meta-history. For example, the Earth is just waved away as no longer having an atmosphere. Yet by a rough estimation of the size of the settled systems, if New Atlantis is its largest city, several billion people had to be left behind, not to mention the entire emotional and cultural history of mankind. Yet a couple centuries later, nobody seems to be really bothered about it, or even very cognizant of it all. I've heard you can do sightseeing explorations to selected locations that are poking up out of the sand and collect tchotchkes to put on a shelf, which does seem to feel a bit like trivializing a total extinction event of the Earth from which few survived. So there are hooks and stubs of really impressive stories. But it feels like Bethesda was just too worried about whatever they came up with as an explanation of what happened to the Earth and why it wasn't saved. Somebody might take offense at it. Like how during character creation there are 2 body styles and 2 walk styles. Now, only an idiot wouldn't interpret them as being physiologically male and physiologically female, but they're only called 1 and 2. I can only imagine how dating profiles are written in the settled systems. And yet, you do get to choose your pronouns during character creation.
Fucking pronouns! Gender ambiguity! Current day Californian
But it goes further than that. The UC talks about earned citizenship, but only in terms of being able to own real estate and get a discount on prices, like it was a Costco membership card. Nothing about civil rights, due process, a voice in the government, all that, dare I say it, political stuff. Meanwhile, the free states talk about their freedom. It's right there in the title, but freedom to do what? And freedom from what? But you apparently can't go into those subjects without being accused of having an agenda nowadays. Gene Roddenberry said that by having Star Trek set in the future, he could take on issues that otherwise wouldn't get past the network censors. But apparently in the internet age, network censors are both more prevalent, less tolerant, and noisier.
That's the level of our narcissism here at Bethesda Western Game Company. Your immersion, you having a good time, you falling into a world and just getting lost. No, current day. Cough. You're boring. You're fucking dull. You have nothing to say. You are a one-hived mind twat waffle.
So small-scale character-driven story arcs only. This is 2023. In fact, the words, "this is 2023, hit my head quite often. This is 2023. You don't need a cutscene to get from the inside to the outside of a building, or from one deck of a ship to the other, or from one part of a city to the other. That problem has been solved multiple times by multiple games. This is 2023. Most folks prefer a dark theme option, or at least midtones for something like the character creator. And then there's the real "this is 2023" issue, the invisible boundary at the end of a zone that, despite statements that might suggest otherwise, this isn't a fully explorable planet, but rather a planet that we can, one at a time, at each planet, randomly generate maps for individual biomes with some random things thrown into them, or occasionally none. And yes, you can play through every quest and have lots of great gameplay without ever having to think about the fact that there is an invisible border out there. But this is 2023, and there are plenty of examples of games that have already solved that. But it's more than that. Sherman set the Wayback Machine a dozen years ago in 2011.
Hi, this is Todd Howard of Bethesda Game Studios, and we're here to show you a sneak peek at our latest game, Skyrim. And if you've played our previous stuff, you know that mountain is not just a backdrop. You can walk all the way to the top of that mountain. And it's a huge world, like our
Now, as many would eventually have to point out, Todd Howard wasn't technically lying, because the specific mountain on the screen during those words was within the world boundary and you could go there. And in 2023, they are saying that technically he isn't lying, saying that they have put together a whole bunch of individual tiles to make a planet, because you can visit a great many randomly generated tiles, and even if you will never actually visit two that are generally adjacent. But this is 2023, and although having bragged about it in 2011, others have met his brag. So if you see something, you can go to it, while in Bethesda still cannot meet the explorer level of George Mallory, who said he wanted to climb Everest because it's there. So yes, people will want to go to the edge of the map to a mountain beyond because it's there. And in 2023, not being able to do that like George Mallory, you haven't really put the boundary of your game completely into the area of exploration. Other things that might not be technically a lie, but way overstated, is the idea of being able to do an almost completely pacifist playstyle. You won't. Too many, way too many of the encounters are instantly hostile and have no capacity to be talked to with at all. However, there are important quest points that pretty much must be done with negotiation, but they are few. So still, negotiation skill is a worthwhile one to get. On the other hand, a heavily stealth playstyle is possible, but it's hard and slow. So most people will be approaching this as a shooter, and it's a good one at that. Frame rates were quite good at 14.4K on a 3080 with an i9 12900K at default settings. This with FSR2. I haven't yet added DLSS, although I expect to soon. The opponents are challenging using cover and retreat, and generally smarter than shown in the Starfield Direct showcase, which was one of the quite pleasant surprises. The companions contributed well, and the excitement level in combat was excellent, and in large part because of something that Bethesda decided to drop from their prior games.
The Vault-Tec assisted targeting system, it pauses the action. So if you're getting overwhelmed, you can hit that button, everything is paused. And then you can target body parts and the head, and there's a percentage, and all that is tied into your skills.
VATS interrupted the pace and made kill shots much too easy, and thus less rewarding. Let you be you in real time. Another thing that they dropped that I am delighted in is the voiced protagonist. It gives you the opportunity to be the voice. So I created Ramon, a kind of cross between Inigo Montoya and Triumph the Insult comic dog, and delightfully wisecrack and ridicule my way through the world, which wouldn't be possible if they had given the protagonist some sort of generic male or female voice. What I had hoped would be an exciting addition to the game was the Jetpack, which at least in the Starfield Direct demo was very exciting. And I hope that at higher levels it will behave like that. But at level 1, it's a rather anemic double jump, and one that by default is sort of hard to use, because on controllers, jump is bound to the Y button by default, which makes it hard to have a finger able to reach it the way you hold a controller in combat. The solution I found was to rebind jump to the right thumbstick press, which by default is empty. I highly recommend this. Rebind jump to right thumbstick press. Ship combat is only fair. For example, there is no lead targeting, and without the piloting skill is even less so. The reason is that without the piloting skill, there is no lateral or vertical strafe. Here's how it works. Without piloting skill, the right thumbstick controls pitch and yaw, while the left thumbstick controls the cruise, speed, and roll. Then with piloting skill unlocked, the right button toggles the left thumbstick so that it is vertical strafe and horizontal strafe. There neither appears to be a reverse strafe or a forward strafe without setting the speed, nor a way to combine strafe and roll simultaneously. So not so much a 6 degree of freedom system, but a 4+2, and only if you take the piloting skill. Now, a phrase that I've been hearing a lot by fans is that, well, it's not a sim, like that was an insult, but no, a sim would be Kerbal Space Program. That's a spaceflight simulator. None of the space combat games being compared to Starfield are space combat sims. It's a comparison of simple versus deep, not game versus simulation. And Starfield frequently takes the approach of simplification. Ammunition weighs nothing. The game will tell you that you have frostbite or are disabled, but you are still running just as fast as before. But with Bethesda, you always wonder, was that a deliberate decision towards gameplay? just being careless, or they're saying, well, if somebody cares, they'll just add the realistic injury effects mod that suits their taste of the several that will undoubtedly be created, or maybe they'll download the no injury mod. So, what are my final notes from the first day of playing Starfield? Am I having fun? Absolutely. Is it a perfect game? Well, obviously from my experience trying to complete the artifact quest, no. Am I going to predict that it will win Game of the Year? Nope, it's going to lose to Baldur's Gate 3 and maybe even be third place to Diablo 4. Baldur's does a better job of expanding and redefining its genre, and frankly, a big bunch of voters will punish Starfield for being an exclusive. Would you vote for a game that you couldn't play on your favorite system? Yeah, that's not unreasonable. Since this is running long, I'll just add for those interested in my contest that the secret word is the mountain that George Mallory wanted to climb. Fly safe, keep it real, and I'll see you in the verse. This is Daniel Raymond for Ray's Guide.